Moving on to your chapter number 4 of Igcse chemistry, ions and ionic bonds. First of all, we need to know what are basically ions. एक हमारे पास होते हैं atoms. One form is an atom. What is those? अगर मैं यहाँ पे लिखूँ atoms, for example, calcium atom. In a calcium atom, the protons are equal to the electrons. If calcium has 20 protons, it would be having 20 electrons. But what is an ion? Ion is formed by either gaining or losing electron. अगर मैं इसी calcium का एक ion देखूँ now calcium is in group number 2. Group number 2 means that the calcium has a charge of +2, and hence the protons in an ion are never and not equal to electrons. Calcium would have 20 protons, but the electrons it has are 18. Why? Because the calcium ions has lost 2 electrons. In an atom, the protons are always equal to the electrons, and in an ion, the protons are not equal to electrons. So the formation of ions, that how are ions formed from atoms? Now, an ion is an electrically charged atom or group of atoms formed by the loss or gain of electrons. This loss or gain of electrons take place to gain a full outer shell of electrons. Let's say, why does any atom has to become an ion? So it can complete its outermost shell. For example, if I talk about chlorine atom, ठीक है ना? Now chlorine atom on the periodic table has a proton number of 17, which means it has electrons as 17 as well. So it has 17 electrons as well. And if we start filling the shells like we have done atomic structure, the first shell is going to contain 2 electrons. The second shell is going to contain 8 electrons, and the third shell is going to contain 7 electrons. 2 plus 8 plus 7 makes 17. But we know that the maximum number of electrons in the first shell can be 2. It is complete. The second shell is also complete, but the third shell is not complete. Why? Because the third shell can hold maximum of 8 electrons, and right now chlorine has only occupied 7 electrons in the last shell. How many more electrons does it need to complete its outermost shell? One more electron. And when this chlorine is going to gain one electron to complete its outermost shell and become 2, 8, 8, gaining electron gives it a negative charge. And how many electrons did it gain? One. So chlorine is going to get a -1 charge. Same is the case, let's say, if we talk about magnesium. Magnesium has 12 electrons, which means it has an electronic configuration of 2, 8, and 2. How is it going to complete its outermost shell? Now it has two options. How many more electrons does it need to complete its outermost shell? 6. Now magnesium has two options. Either it can gain 6 electrons, which is very difficult and is not possible. You cannot gain more than 3 to 4 electrons. What it can do is lose 2 electrons. What if it loses 2 electrons and then make its outermost shell as the second shell, which is already complete? Now, whenever magnesium loses electrons, anything that loses electrons gets a positive charge. And how many electrons is magnesium losing? 2. So we give magnesium a +2 charge. So the electronic structure of an ion will be the same as that of a noble gas, such as helium, neon, and argon, because we know that noble gases have a complete outermost shell with 8 electrons. Metals always lose electrons to become like noble gases, and non-metals always gain electrons to become like noble gases. For example, we have sodium over here. Now we know sodium has 11 protons, which means it has 11 electrons as well. What is the electronic configuration of sodium? 2, 8, and 1. Now, how can it complete its outermost shell? Sodium has to lose this last electron so it can have a complete outermost shell and has a new electronic configuration as 2, 8. So when this sodium is going to lose an electron, it's going to get a plus charge. And how many electrons did it lose? 1. So Na sodium is going to have a +1 charge when it forms an ion. Here you can see that it had 2 electrons in the first shell, it had 8 electrons in the second shell, and it had 1 electron in the last shell. Other are empty spaces. The other 7 are unoccupied. It had two choices. Either it could gain 7 or it could lose 1. What was more easy? To lose one electron is more easy.
Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, sir, my internet stopped working midway through the lecture. I was on the part with um
This
yeah,
part?
I was on this part.
This one?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll explain to you again with another example. Two rules that any atom forms an ion and it has to complete its outermost shell with 8 electrons. Either it can be done by gaining electrons or it can be done by losing electrons to have a complete outermost shell of 8 electrons. यहाँ पे example we have of sodium. Sodium has 2 electrons in the first shell, it is complete. It has 8 electrons in the second shell, it is complete. But it has 1 electron in its third shell, it is not complete. So sodium has two options. Either it can gain 7 electrons or it can lose 1 electron. What is more easy? Losing 1 electron is more easy. So sodium is going to lose this electron. And now it's only going to have two shells. The first shell is complete with 2 electrons, and the second shell is also complete with 8 electrons, and then it gets a charge of plus 1.